Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're not just talking about management theory. We are really drilling into the core emotional and strategic crucible of executive life.
Yeah, specifically that agonizing reality of leading a company when everything is on fire.
Exactly. We're doing a deep dive into the hard things about hard things. So, our mission today is to take a stack of some truly tough insights and, well, synthesize them. On one side, we've got the ruthless leadership philosophy of Ben Horowitz, drawn from his time at LoudCloud, Opsware, and of course, A16S.
And we're stacking that against the other side, the side people rarely talk about,
Yeah.
the emotional toll.
Yeah.
We have this fascinating academic study on CEO loneliness and some cold, hard data from CB Insights on why startups actually fail.
Right.
So the central tension we want to unpack for you is this psychological dichotomy. Horowitz demands this relentless, bold, decisive action, the whole wartime CEO thing.
But those very moments, the ones that demand that kind of action, are the exact triggers for this profound sense of isolation.
Exactly. So we're looking for the blueprint. For you, to build that psychological muscle, you need to survive what he famously called the struggle.
Okay, so let's unpack that tension right away. If you've listened to Horowitz or read his work, you know his message is stark. He says hesitation isn't just a minor flaw, it is the absolute worst thing a CEO can do.
He really sees it as a corrosive acid. It's not just a missed opportunity. He thinks it actively rots the organization from the inside. You wait a week in the tech world, and that could be it. Game over.
And it's not just about the market opportunity you lose, right? It's about your team's confidence.
Yeah, that might be even worse. It erodes their faith in you.
And this is where he pivots the whole conversation away from just intelligence. He basically argues that, being smart is table stakes for a CEO. Courage is the real differentiator.
Right. You have to actively hone this psychological muscle, as he puts it. You have to confront fear. If you always take the easy route, you're literally training yourself to be a coward.
It's an aggressive take.
It is. And it's all embodied in this mantra he supposedly got from an ex-prison gang leader. Run toward the pain and darkness.
Which means what, exactly?
It means that tough conversation, that horrible truth, that existential threat, you don't rationalize it away. You move toward it. Immediately. Forcefully.
I do wonder, though, does that just encourage recklessness? Is there a risk that you just run toward the pain and burn out, or make a rash decision?
That's a fair question. I think the distinction he'd make is between a bold, calculated move and just paralysis. It's about seizing momentum. And you can see this philosophy embedded in the culture at A16's DIDS.
Yeah, so.
They celebrate tough calls. They celebrate bold risks. I mean, a prime example is their investment in someone like WeWork's Adam Newman. It was hugely controversial.
Very.
But their belief was that if you become too risk-averse, you stifle the very innovation that changes industries. They'd rather back a flawed innovator than a hesitant manager.
Which makes that distinction between leadership types so much more important, because most management books we read, they're written for a totally different kind of leader.
Precisely. Horowitz points out that almost all of that literature is for what he calls the peacetime CEO.
Okay, define that for us. What does a peacetime CEO do?
A peacetime CEO is leading when the company is, and I'm quoting him here, steamrolling through the industry.
So think early Google search.
Exactly. A dominant player. Their focus is long-term. Organizational design, people development, scaling culture, delegation. They have the luxury of time.
But the startup world, it's almost never peacetime. It demands the wartime CEO.
The wartime CEO is fighting for survival. Running out of cash, a market shifts, a bigger competitor emerges. The classic example is Steve Jobs returning to Apple when they had, 3 weeks of cash left.
That's the definition of wartime.
And in wartime, everything changes. Delegation goes way down, centralization goes way up. The CEO has to make a huge number of decisions very quickly, even if it undermines long-term stuff. Survival first.
And a lot of this thinking comes from Andy Grove, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Grove's book, Only the Paranoid Survive. Horowitz brings up the story of Intel pivoting away from memory chips to focus only on CPUs. Grove asked his colleague, if we got fired and a new CEO came in, what would they do? And the answer was obvious.
They'd exit the memory business.
Immediately. And the hard part of that decision, the wartime part, was that it meant laying off 80% of the people in that division.
A scale of brutality that, business school does not prepare you for.
It's the psychological cost of command.
Yeah.
The courageous choice isn't the popular one. It's the one that's necessary for survival, no matter how devastating it feels.
And that constant pressure, that demand for these huge life or death decisions, It leads right to the thing that new research has really shed a light on, the personal toll. We all know the phrase, it's lonely at the top.
And now we have data to back it up. There's this really interesting study from Norway that gets into the specifics. It confirms CEOs experience intense loneliness, but it's really important to understand what kind of loneliness it is. It's overwhelmingly state loneliness.
Yeah.
It's temporary, it's situational, it's tied to a specific event. It is not trait loneliness, which is, a chronic or personality-linked thing. This is more like the pressure a commander feels in the moments before a huge decision. It's crushing, but it's situational.
So it's not just burnout, it's the weight of a unique responsibility. What did the study say were the triggers?
Number one, a full 100% of participants was decision-making.
100%.
Every single one. Even if they consulted everyone, the ultimate responsibility for the risk and the consequence was theirs alone. You can't delegate that final burden.
That makes perfect sense for a wartime CEO. What else?
Then you have the emotionally heavy stuff.
Yeah.
71% cited sensitive employee cases.
Right, things like disciplinary action or health issues.
Exactly. Things where confidentiality is so high you can't involve anyone else, and you're directly affecting someone's life. That creates this profound isolation. And almost as high, at 64%, was change management processes. When you're pivoting the company, you feel this intense self-doubt. You start asking yourself, am I leading everyone off a cliff?
And I think the one that's maybe the most complex is the one about secrecy. The confidentiality cases.
Yeah, half the participants cited this. This is when you know something huge is coming. An acquisition, a merger, massive layoffs, information that directly affects your people, but you are forbidden from sharing it.
That must create a terrible conflict.
It's a severe role conflict. You want to be supportive, but your role demands total secrecy. So you have to put on this mask, a distance persona, and that's what creates that feeling of isolation.
And this isn't just a feeling, it's a real operational risk, isn't it?
It is. One study said 50% of CEOs felt their loneliness directly hurt their performance.
And that leads to real-world consequences.
For sure. Chronic stress, poor sleep, lower commitment to the organization. When the leader's emotional state falters, their decision-making suffers, and that puts the whole company at risk.
So if that's the internal cost, how do you manage it? How do you cope with the loneliness but still be, ruthlessly decisive like Horowitz demands?
Well, let's start with the coping mechanisms the study found, because they're the foundation.
Okay.
First, and every single participant used this, was the trusted sparring partner.
Okay, and what is that? Is that a therapist, a coach?
It could be, but it was often a board chairperson, a deputy, or even their spouse. The key is that it's a completely safe, confidential space to just vent, to release emotion, and critically to stress test their thinking. That process builds the confidence they need to go back and make the call.
You need that outlet.
Absolutely. The second thing for 71% was accepting the premise.
What does that mean?
They just intentionally framed loneliness as part of the job description. It's non-negotiable. The argument is, if you stop fighting it, you reduce the negative emotional hit. You stop taking the isolation so personally.
That sounds like a necessary mental trick for survival.
And finally, about 43% mentioned disconnection, both mental and physical.
So hobbies, working out, that kind of thing.
Yep. But also sometimes physical distancing. Shopping in a different town, having separate social circles. It helps maintain a professional boundary and the objectivity you need for the really hard calls.
That need for objectivity, that flows right into Horowitz's practical advice on what he calls hard management. Let's drill down into some of his tactical lessons.
The first big one is on transparency and trust. Horowitz has this brilliant rule about it. He says the amount of communication you need is inversely proportional to the level of trust in your organization.
So if trust is low, you're just stuck in endless meetings explaining every little thing.
Exactly. It's totally non-productive. So transparency is the tool you use to build trust fast. Share the bad news, share the challenges. You get more brains on the problem, which is what a wartime CEO desperately needs.
He also has famously clear and firm advice on layoffs, the ultimate hard thing.
Brutal, but efficient. He says once the decision is made, do not delay, move fast. It prevents rumors, reduces anxiety. And managers have to be trained to explain the motive clearly. The company failed its plan, not the employee. And the decision is final.
What about the people left behind, the survivors?
The CEO has to get in front of the whole company immediately. How their laid-off colleagues were treated is the single biggest predictor of whether the survivors will stay loyal. You have to do it with dignity, even at warp speed.
Let's talk about a concept everyone who's worked somewhere struggling knows. Management debt.
Right. It's a short-term fix that creates a huge long-term cost, and he has two classic examples.
Okay.
The first is putting two in a box. You give two people the same role, the same responsibility, two VPs of marketing.
Why is that dead?
Because when something fails, who's accountable? Nobody. The system breaks. And then you have to hire another layer above them just to fix the mess you created.
A very common trap when you're growing fast.
The other one is overcompensating a star employee just because they got an outside offer. It feels good in the moment, but you've just taught every other person on the team that the only way to get a raise is to threaten to quit. You've wrecked your culture.
And what about his warning on measuring metrics? That one feels very subtle.
It's so profound. He warns that anything you measure will automatically create a set of employee behaviors. If you only measure lines of code, you'll get a lot of bad code. If you only measure sales volume, you might get terrible, unsustainable deals.
I saw the fix.
You have to constantly test your desired result against the likely resulting behaviors. Does best customer experience lead to employees ignoring costs? You have to anticipate and prevent those harmful side effects.
So to put all this in context, let's look at the battlefield. Why do we need so many wartime CEOs? The CB Insights analysis of startup failures gives us the answer.
And it's a direct indictment of hesitation. The single biggest reason for failure, a massive 42%, was no market need.
They built a beautiful solution for a problem that didn't exist.
A fatal flaw in early decisiveness. Then you have the practical stuff. 29% just ran out of cash.
And the third.
23% said it was not the right team, lacking the right skills or the checks and balances you need to get through the struggle.
And when you add in things like lack of focus and failure to pivot, well, the thesis holds. Hesitation kills.
Which brings us right back to the model that Horowitz and Mark Andreessen built at A16s. It was designed to fight these exact failure points. Their whole philosophy was founders first.
Right. They believed it's easier to teach an innovator to be a CEO than to teach a CEO how to innovate.
Exactly. Traditional VCs would replace the founder with professional management. Horowitz said, in tech, the inventor's intuition and speed are more valuable than bureaucracy.
But the problem is that inventor CEO is often terrible at the hard management stuff. The layoffs, the process, the accountability.
So A16s became the support system. They built what they called the firm as a product. They hired hundreds of people in ops, marketing, recruiting, policy to basically function as a professional CEO network for that inventor.
So they built the Fortune 500 infrastructure and offered it as a service.
That's a great way to put it. It freed up the founder to focus on innovation. It fundamentally reframed what a VC firm does.
Wow. What a synthesis of the internal and external pressures. We started with Horowitz's demand for fearless action.
The wartime mindset.
And we matched it against the data on the immense personal cost of that command. That state loneliness that hits hardest in those exact moments.
And we've seen that surviving requires both. You need the clear process transparency, no management debt, and you need the personal emotional regulation.
The sparring partner, accepting the premise. So here's the final thought for you to take away. It's a paradox we've been circling.
The loneliness study revealed something really interesting. Those close workplace relationships. They can actually increase a CEO's feeling of isolation when confidentiality is required.
Because the professional distance you need to make that objective Horowitz-style tough call, it's completely at odds with those personal bonds.
So the question for you is this. If the weight of command means you have to accept loneliness as the price of the job, how do great leaders navigate that? How do you balance the need for vulnerable personal support, that sparring partner, with the need to maintain the professional distance required to make the calls that affect everyone, including the people you trust most?
It's the tension that really defines the burden of leadership. We hope this deep dive gives you a blueprint, not just for running a company, but for building the